if the situation lines up to where they have the tackle that they want there, I think they go offensive line again, which, that's the story of the offseason for this team after all those moves that you just mentioned, Cap. They pulled off via trades ahead of free agency.
Would they take Genty if he's there? Bears continue to make moves in the offseason. They had a great trade with Joe Tooney, another one for Jonah Jackson. They go out in free agency. Now they lock up Kyler Gordon. All of these moves, do you think there is a position group they're zeroing in on in the draft, or is it my philosophy? Who's the best dude on the board?
They have a lot of routes they could go at 10, but I still think at, that position, like if Ashton Genty's gone, which we expect him to go to the Raiders, or if he falls to 9, I'm not sold the Saints are going to take a quarterback even after the Derek Carr news. I think you go trenches there, and it makes sense to continue to build this roster from the inside out when you heard Ryan Poles throughout the offseason remain pretty steadfast on his belief that they've got to protect Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson has said it every chance he's gotten to. And so with the uncertainty about Braxton Jones' timeline to come back from injury and Karan Amagachi being an unproven prospect, you don't go into training camp with that setup for left tackle. You just don't. So I think the best player available and need is something that they can check off at 10, which is why if the situation lines up to where they have the tackle that they want there, I think they go offensive line again, which, that's the story of the offseason for this team after all those moves that you just mentioned, Cap, they pulled off via trades ahead of free agency.
Would they take Genty if he's there?
How can you not? Right? Because there's other places to get tackles. There's other places to get running backs. Let's not act like that's the only spot at 10 to address both needs, and especially with how deep that running back group is. But Ben Johnson said it in Palm Beach, there's different flavors of running backs in this draft. If we're looking at 31 flavors, the number one is Ashton Genty. And a player like that, you don't want to ever really be drafting 10th overall. It means that you had a bad record the year before and that, the players on your roster weren't able to help you win games. So it's a situation where I think they can't pass that up if he's there.
We were talking earlier, Courtney, about, and we've heard this from Ben Johnson, now we've heard this from Dennis Allen about the win-now mentality of the Chicago Bears. Like, yeah, we can win now. What I was telling Cap is, I guess when you look around this depth chart, how many veterans are on this team, offensive line now being able to be shored up. You got members on the defensive line in Jarrett and Dale that's on this team. They locked up Kyler Gordon. I can understand why they'd say that. I think that one of the number one question mark is like, what is Caleb Williams in year 2? But otherwise, I'm sure this new coaching staff says, well, we got a lot of veterans that we don't have to teach. We just want them to be involved in this new culture. But ultimately, we've got enough to win. I guess that's why they say that. When you hear that, what comes to mind for you?
I think back to last year and just how the setup became, or what the setup that they created to go get a quarterback. It wasn't like Caleb was coming into the worst team in the NFL. They were 7-10 the year before he was drafted. So I think that allowed them to have a little bit shorter of a route to get to a place where they think the roster's in win now mode, because you can look at the different position groups, the ones they've addressed in free agency and via trades and throughout the offseason, and see where the depth is and see that this is not reminiscent of a team that looks like it should have been 5-12 last year. They've overhauled important position groups. They've added, after seeing how critical it is for your pass rush, they finally, 3 years in, they finally addressed it to getting some marquee players in there and some big names. And for Dennis Allen's defense to have that attacking mindset, you've got to get after the quarterback. So to me, it looks like a team that's in win now mode because they finally addressed the things that were priorities for a long time with not C+ level moves. These are solid B to A- level players that they brought in across the board. And that should put you in win now mode. But you're right. If Caleb doesn't if Caleb's growth, and teams need to know about their quarterback after year 2. That's becoming the trend because you want to win with a quarterback on his rookie contract, because players like Kyler Gordon and the way that they're spending on this roster, the Bears roster is becoming more expensive now, and they're going to have contracts that come due in the next 2 to 3 years are going to make it even more expensive. So it's important to win when Caleb's young and when he's in the early part of his rookie contract as opposed to later on or even on his second deal. But we don't know yet. Like that's the big unknown, because it feels right now like everything's going to be in place for their upgrades to pan out elsewhere around him. But will we actually see if Caleb can take all of that talent that's around him and maximize it? You won't know that right away. I think you'll get a feel for it, and just hearing some of the changes that they're implementing offensively when we're in, mandatory minicamp and then when the team comes back for training camp. But that's the key to all this. Like, he's got to be able to, like, they did their part this offseason. Now it's on him to take the talent that's around him and elevate it.
Do you think, like today, we just heard from Tom Pelissero just reported that Shedeur Sanders is flying to Vegas tonight. He'll meet with the Raiders. Abdul Carter with the Patriots today. Do you think the Bears are at all thinking about trading up in the draft to try and make sure they get whoever it is that they want?
Who would they trade up for? That's the only reason I have some pause about this, because I've heard the scenarios. If it's Genty, if it's Abdul Carter, you do have the 2 second-round picks. So at least logically you have the ammunition to do it. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a reason to, though, because this is not a draft class that has multiple can't-miss generational talent prospects. It's a draft class that's built on depth from the defensive tackle position, which, it's like, look at that position, for example. It's Mason Graham, and then it's everybody else. And I think if you're in the spot to get the everybody else, whether it's the Bears, whether it's another team, I think you're okay with that. And so I don't know if they'd be chomping at the bit to go are they a running back away? Are they another pass rusher away when they can address those needs later on? So I don't fall in that camp. But it is going to be interesting, because where the team that's ahead of them, the Saints, are the Steelers going to try to get in front of the Bears there? Is there a chance that Chicago could maybe move back? I feel like that's a more likely scenario where you could find Kelvin Banks Jr., for example. If you're looking for a left tackle, do you need to draft him at 10? Could you get him a few spots back if there's a team that's trying to go get a quarterback? Maybe, but it's really going to be interesting to see what happens at 9. I know that they were at 9 a couple of years ago and they traded back one spot, so that's the exact same positioning they were in when there are some teams that do want to move up and try to address a quarterback need. Now we have the path to get there. Will the Bears be affected by that? I guess we'll see.
We turn now to Shay Norling with Norling 8.0. We have the prayer circle in place to get Mason Graham at 10. But as far as the Saints is concerned, Shay, you got a quarterback there, right?
Yeah, I did. I panic selected Jackson Dart to New Orleans. I did. Part of it is I think it's funny.
Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders, or do you have Sanders going?
No, he has Shedeur Sanders 2 going to the Browns.
Courtney, I'm manufacturing a pathway for Mason Graham to be available for the Bears, and the only way I can get there is if Travis Hunter is available for the Jags.
So it goes. So for again, we go through this. This is our only mock draft that we read. Courtney, you have to understand. It's Norling 8.0. So it is Genty 6 to the Raiders. I think Song and Dance Man, Pete Carroll likes the idea of having a running back in that spot. That's great. McMillan at 7, Jihad at 8. Then Jackson Dart, the quarterback, at 9.
Carolina does what?
And then at 10, there's where Mason Graham falls.
Okay.
And he'd be a great pick. Absolutely.
I mean, he's the top defensive tackle on the board. And I know his sack numbers aren't 3.5 last season, but think about how many times he was getting doubled. But think about, in that same breath, how many quarterback pressures he had and how many times he affected the quarterback. I have a story coming out tomorrow at ESPN.com about this defensive tackle class. And I had a really good conversation with Ryan Poles in Palm Beach about why we're seeing the importance placed on that position, specifically in the draft. I think Mel Kiper has 31 with draftable grades, 31 defensive tackles. Obviously, Mason Graham at the top. It's not going to be the 2019 class where you get 6 of these guys in the first round. But if the top guy is there, and some people are trying to connect dots based on what they heard the conversation, the 1920 football drive when they were talking about Mason Graham being high up on their board. I think there'd be a lot of happy Bears fans if he somehow, in Shay's world, fell to 10, if that became reality in the real world.
From I guess based on what you've been able to glean regarding Shedeur Sanders, is there a LeVar Ball brothers pressure that Deion is putting on any of these teams?
That's a great question.
Because I like to know, like Shedeur has gone from anywhere between 2 and outside the top 10 in some of these mock drafts.
26 on one of them.
I don't know where to go with this, Courtney. So has Deion's influence stronger or not as strong as LeVar Ball and the Ball brothers?
And a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, you think that like the fluctuation of his draft stock is based on Deion, not based on Shedeur and the skill of the quarterback?
Just wondering if Deion has influence at all when it comes to Shedeur Sanders and where he could go.
Or is there a sideshow effect where people are like, oh, God, remember he wouldn't let him go somewhere cold?
I don't think so. I really don't think so because, of course, like we think back to the LeVar Ball situation and the man was trying, rightfully so. It was his right to try to capitalize before his sons became NBA stars, or at least, with what LaMelo has become. But he was building businesses and brands before his kids actually did anything in the NBA. I don't see Deion doing that because they've already had that stuff in place long before now. I don't think teams look at that as a sideshow effect. I think teams are wondering, what's the ceiling of this guy? Is he projected to be a high-end career backup, or could he be a franchise quarterback? That's why you see the fluctuation. I know that Shea in his 8.0 mock draft brought up Cleveland at 2. It's so interesting to me that a team that was 3-14 last year, that just paid Myles Garrett a boatload of money, most mocks don't have them taking a quarterback. What, do you expect to be that bad again in 2025? To be drafting, be in the March for Arch or whatever we're calling the sweepstakes for Arch Manning? It's weird to me. It's weird to me that they've had the quarterbacks in. They had him in last week. They're finishing up their top 30 visits, but it doesn't feel plausible that they would go quarterback over Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Probably because the best player available argument, probably because a number of other things. But I don't think it has anything to do with, people are worried about Shedeur and Deion and the element of maybe some too many cooks sort of thing. I don't see that.
Boy, I hope you have that trademarked, that March for Arch. Please tell me you got that trademarked.
I actually heard it from someone else. So, I think that it's probably making its way to the trademark office now. But it's, for the Saints, that's, for the news that comes out on Friday, I know Deion quote tweeted something with eyeball emojis because it's going to get interesting to see what they do at 9. I don't think this should change what the Saints' plans are. I think they need to fully commit to the rebuild. So then that team can be in position to go get Arch Manning or one of the top quarterbacks in a much deeper class next year.
March for Arch. All right. I've got the Bears at 10 wins, Courtney.
Oh, my God.
Double digits again. Didn't you do this last year, Cap? Didn't everybody do this last year?
I was at 11 last year.
I was at 9.
Damn. I think I was at 9 too, somewhere between 8 and 9. I think 9 is a safe spot. Jordan Love's got the most to prove of any quarterback in this division this year. And I still think the Vikings and the Lions are going to be really good. So I think 9 is shooting pretty high, but should be realistic given the state of the roster.
Courtney, have a wonderful day. You're killing it on national TV.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.